We are live. Welcome to the Bookish Hour podcast here at We are so happy to be back with you today. My name is Burr.
And I am J.C. Kenney. And I tell you what, we're so excited, folks, to be hanging out with you for the third year in a row. We have three amazing guests. There's a saying that heroes get remembered, but legends never die. You got three legends right here, folks. If
you guys aren't familiar with JC and myself, our show, we air on YouTube, Twitch, and Substack. So if you're on any of those platforms, you can come hang out with us. We talk with authors from all over the world at this point. We've been doing this since 2021, and we're thrilled that Malice has invited us back. It's an honor to be here again with such incredible guests, and we hope that you enjoy our show. We will, usually our show, because it is a live stream, we always encourage audience participation and questions. For today's format, we will hold questions to the end, so please keep your, if you have anything to ask, we will get to you at the end. JC, any final thoughts to share before we get started?
Yeah, just a quick shout out. A Bookish Hour alum who you may have heard of, El Casamano, was with us 2 years ago. In case you haven't heard, her Finley Donovan series is going to be on TV, which is really, really cool. Now, to our three panelists here, I'm not saying since you're here, you're going to end up having your shows on TV, but I'm not saying it. You bet. Sarah, I think it's time to get bookish.
Let's do it.
You first, ladies first.
All right.
I already wrote the rules. We had this whole plan and I can't follow the rules, so.
That's all right. That is, and that's our show. We're here. It's a fun conversation. We are joined by Donna Andrews, who is an award-winning author of the beloved Meg Langslow Mysteries and the Turing Hopper Mysteries. A winner of the Agatha, Anthony, Barry, and Lefty Awards, she has written more than 40 novels and is celebrated for her witty comedic take on cozy crime. Probable Cause, her next Meg Langslow mystery, is out August 4th, 2026. Woo!
But wait, there's more. Alan Orloff is Anthony, Agatha, Derringer, and Thrillo Award-winning author of multiple mystery series, including the Last Laugh mysteries and the Mall Cop series. No, not the Mall Cop series. No. Sorry, I'm getting different glasses soon. The Mess Hopkins series. So, sorry about that, Alan. Maybe you could do a new one called the Mall Cop series. Anyway, known for blending humor with crime, he has also published numerous short stories. His latest novel, The Family Biz, which I see right there we go, a standalone heist thriller released on April 7th, so it's a total book baby. Alan, welcome.
We have Hank Phillippi Ryan, a USA Today best-selling author of 17 thrillers. She has won every major mystery award, including numerous Agatha Awards, and her work is inspired by her distinguished career as an investigative journalist, which has earned her 37 Emmy Awards. Her next novel, Mother, Daughter, Sister, Stranger, releases September 1st, 2026. Welcome, Hank. Thank you for being here.
For the record, I was told that the working title is Two Amazing Superstar Mystery Writers and Alan.
Well, speaking of which, so let's start. This is a bookish moment, kind of standard question here. Let's start with your journey. How did y'all come into writing? Because, I don't think it was necessarily your first career effort. So, Hank, you first. How did you go from investigative journalist to amazing author?
Just luck and fear, I guess. That happened. I'd yard behind our house, and I always wanted to be a mystery writer. But at some point I thought, no, maybe I don't want to be a mystery writer. Maybe I want to be a detective. Maybe I want to be Miss Marple or be Poirot, rather than write about Miss Marple and Poirot. But fast forward so many years, I've been a television reporter about 30 years, when I just had a good idea for a novel. And you know how you feel when you have a good idea, you get goosebumps and you think, wow, this is gonna work, this is gonna work. And I went home and I said to my husband, sweetheart, I've got a great idea for a mystery, I'm going to write a novel. And Jonathan says, great. He says, do you know how to write a book? And he's very supportive, but this was out of the blue. And I remember so profoundly, I said, how hard can it be? I've read a million books, and I soon learned how hard it can be, of course, but that became Prime Time, my first novel, which won the Agatha for Best First Novel. What's so interesting about that, and so life-changing about that, is I had never written a novel before. I didn't know how to do it. I told a story every day for 30 years as a reporter, with a beginning, middle, and end. But that moment that I had a good idea and I sort of took a chance and did it was life-changing to me. So it just shows you, I was 55 years old at that time, so it's never too late to start it. I'm sort of the poster child for never starting too late and being a little bit brave.
There you go. Fantastic. Alan, how about you?
Well, as a kid, I hated English class. Just despised it. I was a numbers guy, which my father was an English teacher, so he didn't much like that. But then I went to school, I got an engineering degree and a business degree, and fast forward like 40 years, and I told my wife, I think I want to write. And she said, great! What do you know about writing? I said, I don't know, I'm going to learn. How hard could it be? And so I took some classes, I took some workshops, started writing. It was really bad. I remember I took an adult ed class, and we had to do like a short story as part of our assignment. And I turned to her and she goes, it's good, but you know what? You don't need 40 semicolons on the first page. So then I learned I got a couple of semicolons and just kept working at it, and luckily got published.
I did not have a whole other career before I started writing. When they get those line tablets in grade school and everybody else is practicing their letters, and I started writing stories, which is why I still to this day have lousy handwriting. My dad who was a marine biologist, brought a saltwater aquarium to class, and one of the clams died. And my teacher cleaned out the dead clam and handed me the shell. I think the idea was to take it home to my dad as a subtle hint that we needed a new clam for the aquarium. I taped it together with white medical adhesive tape, painted eyes on it, named it Winifred H. Clam, and began writing stories about Winifred H. Clam's journey around the world on the ocean where he was walking. My teacher took it to a friend of hers who was a writer, who was so impressed with my second or third grade, I can't remember which, efforts, that she sent me back a little gold-colored clam, thereby establishing the entirely spurious connection that if you write something, you will be rewarded for it.
From the bookstore.
But then I took a detour when I graduated from college with a English and drama major in writing, and I hit the making a living thing. And I didn't manage to get anything published until, two things got me published. One was that over the course of working for over 20 years as a nonfiction writer at a corporation, or a writer of corporate fiction, I learned the kind of technique and discipline that you need if you want to do this as a living. And then I came to Malice. And I heard about this contest, the Malice Domestic St. Martin's Press Best First Traditional Mystery Contest. And I thought, well, the book I'm working on would be perfect. I'm going to win that contest next year. And, I persevered, and I did. So Malice got me started.
Support has been a really important part of all of your starts, and either having supportive friends, spouses, communities, and that is just, and finding that in Malice is just so, so special. But you guys have reached levels of success that like we can only hope of. And I'm just wondering, what keeps you motivated as you're writing, book 40 on? What keeps you motivated to sit down and write and share more stories with us?
It's still fun.
I mean, I think that's such an interesting question because it feels like it would be easy not to do it. I thought when I saw my first novel, and I opened that box, and there was prime time, and I thought, this is going to be in a library, this is going to be in a bookstore, this is going to be, people are going to read this, strangers are going to read this and read the story that I wrote. And there was this sort of mystical, magical feeling of connection there, that I had grown up reading books, that all my life I had read books, and now I had written one that someone else was going to read. And so the challenge of it, the joy of it, it's about 95% difficult and terrifying, but the 5%, and maybe more, that's absolutely glorious when you have a good idea, or when you think of something, or when you solve a problem, or you think, wow, that is a good story, and then you think, oh no, it's fine, and you pull yourself back a little bit. But there's a lure that comes from storytelling that's just as powerful for the storyteller as it is for the reader. And I don't use an outline for my novels. I have no idea what's going to happen next. And the thing that keeps me writing is that I can't wait to find out what the people do. And the only way I can find that out is to write it myself.
What's the motivation for you?
Well, like Hank said, challenge. I like to be challenged. So each time I open up a new blank document to start my new novel, I'm totally convinced I have no idea how to write the first sentence. And usually I'm right, it's usually worn out that I have no idea what I'm doing. But it keeps going and you keep doing it. You know in the past, okay, I've done this before, I can do it again, hopefully. And that's just sort of, I go for the challenge. And short stories are the same way, Each short story, you try to get a different twist on things, so it gives you a chance to try new things, and it's always refreshing. Keep going.
It's so funny, a friend of mine suggested that I keep a writing diary. Day 1 of writing the novel, how I felt and where I was. Day 2 of writing the novel, how I felt and where I was. So I thought that's a good idea. That will help me understand myself in my writing process. So I looked back at old ones, and one says day 1, no idea. Day 2, no idea. And I thought, this is not really helpful. I sort of stopped doing that because I think Alan is so right. There's not a moment, there's not a novel that I write where I don't think from time to time, and I wonder if you think so too for yours, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how I wrote the other ones. I don't know how to write novels. Whose idea was this? It's the stupidest thing that anybody has ever written. Nobody's going to want to read this. And finally, after all these years, I say to my husband, this isn't going to work. This is the time it isn't going to work. And Jonathan says, you always say that. And I say, but maybe this is the time. This is the time. And Jonathan says, you always say that. And finally, it sort of sank in that that's just part of the process. That fear and that the feeling that you can't do it again is part of the process. And you just think, you know what, I can. I've done it before, I'm going to do it again, and we'll see.
See, I never think that last part.
I refer to that as the it's all crap phase of the writing process. I like Hank, I do outline, but invariably, and this should be encouraging to young writers, or maybe discouraging. Every book, at least for the last dozen books, every book, I've got an outline, it's a good outline, I like it, but at some point I reach the, oh my God, it's all crap. This is a book they're going to find out that I'm a fraud. And not only is it all crap, but there's not enough of it. I'm going to have an outline and I'm not going to have enough words. But I usually get past that eventually. It's like the shark. Sharks only breathe, it's really true, some sharks only breathe when they go forward. Writers only write when they go forward. There are two reasons why I keep doing this. One is that it's kind of how I experience the world. I mean, something cool happens and I think, oh wow, that would make a great scene. Something, I read something and that would be a great setting for a book. And you know, I recently noticed that, as many of you have heard me say, because I'm so excited about this, fox hunters in the UK, they're not really allowed to hunt and kill foxes in the UK anymore, in many, but increasing number of places. It's considered, it's a violent, bloody sport. And they're trying to find a, you know, dragging a dead fox along a trail isn't really as exciting. Do you know what they're doing now instead of chasing and killing foxes in the UK?
Politicians?
Not yet. But they get volunteer cross-country runners. And they volunteer cross-country runners. And the minute I heard that, I could see the plot. That would be a bad little rising. I'm about to start writing it. But the other reason is that the feedback I get from readers. I know during the pandemic, when all of us were, you know, I really enjoyed the emails I got from readers saying, "Wow, I love escaping from the real world that is so dark and dangerous right now into your books." And I kind of felt the same way about escaping into my fictional world to write them. And also, I never forget, my mother got a note from a distant cousin that said, "Please pass along to Donna my thanks. My husband is going through, we don't know whether he's going to make it or not. He's going through a very serious illness." And what we do these days, I sit and I read Donna's books to him. And we get a lot of laughs, and they are in short supply in our house, apart from when we're reading. And just getting notes like that, it makes you want to continue, you know?
I think it's interesting. I remember when, at the beginning of the pandemic, March 20th, 2020, or whatever it was, I was on book tour and I was in the Palm Beach airport and everybody was terrified and all I wanted to do was go home. I had this big event with hundreds of people and it was great and I should have been really happy, but I was just terrified. And I went to the Palm Beach airport and I have to tell you that people weren't wearing masks quite yet, just from time to time. And I saw a woman with a mask and she pulled off her mask and then she sneezed and put the mask on. I don't think that's how that's supposed to be. So I got on the plane and I flipped over my laptop because I love to write on airplanes. And I looked at my current work in progress and I thought, why are you writing this? Why are you writing a thriller that people are just going to read for entertainment? You should be doing something serious, you should be working, you should be figuring out how to save the world. Why are you writing? Why are you writing a novel? And it entered my mind. It's always safe inside a book. It's always safe inside a book. And that has really been, I say that to myself all the time now. This is why we do what we do, is to have us walk in somebody else's shoes, to deal with somebody else's problems, to see that our little world isn't the only little world, and a book is what can take us there. And it makes me feel proud and honored to be able to take people on that safe journey. And I have to tell you that I went back to that manuscript with renewed energy at that point, because I felt we all do have a purpose in life, and that we are the storytellers. We are saving the world.
Lean in here and borrow the mic. So, we've had some laughs, which is fantastic, which kind of dovetails right into our first question. For Donna, this is for you, and then Alan and Hank kind of have a little bit of a follow-up. Donna, you mentioned Langsdorff books. They're fabulous. They're hilarious. And that's, people love that humor. And so, I guess for you in particular, do you feel pressure, to be funny? And so then how does the humor come onto the page? And then for Alan and Hank, do you ever feel like the challenge or the pressure to work humor into your story? So Donna, how is it being the queen of funny cozies?
Yeah, the pressure, yes, but I try to remind myself that the humor isn't something that's stuck on. It's kind of the way you see the world. I mean, it's sometimes in dark times it's like making jokes to whistle past the graveyard. And in good times, laughter comes easily. So it's not so much that I feel pressured to have humor, as I really hope that what strikes me as funny this time around also strikes everything else as funny. Because it's always, on Monday, it's always hilarious to me, and on Tuesday it all falls flat. And I just hope that Monday's the real thing, But one of the things that ever seen the movie Punchline, where Tom Hanks plays a stand-up comedian, and there's this one scene that I think of as very applicable to what writers do. He's standing in front of a mirror, and he's reading a line from his routine, stand-up routine, and he's trying 17 different phrasings and emphases, and that's exactly what we do. Like, okay, it's not funny, it's not funny, it's not funny. We bring in the changes and we get the perfect one and hope we hit on it.
So I've had the pleasure of being in a writing group with Donna Andrews here for 15 years. We met monthly, and get this for the dream team. It's Donna and me and Art Taylor sitting back there, Ellen Crosby and John Gilstrap. So we meet monthly every month, for 15 years. So I got a sneak peek of Donna's books as they were in progress. And I'm not saying that Art and I really contributed a lot to Donna's humor, but I'm not saying we didn't either. No, I would never have the gumption to try to sit down and try to write a funny story. I could never carry it off for 300 pages like Donna could do it. So I just use it as a seasoning. I try to put it in there, try to punch up some scenes, and I concentrate mostly on suspense.
Can I mention that our group, Art and Alan did a little bit better than I had a previous group. It was a good group, but they didn't understand that sometimes I write a short story that isn't funny. I remember one horrible meeting when I was reading aloud, and for those of you who know the Chesapeake Crimes series, it's my story, The Last Caving Trip in Store Warning. I was reading this story aloud, and they were like nervous laughs. Why were they laughing? Because this was a really dark, serious film. But I could tell you the exact line in that story where they all suddenly, simultaneously realized that I should have warned them I was not trying to be funny. The line was, I was going to make this the last caving trip for both of us. They got it. Warn people if you're out of character, right?
I think the genre thing is funny because one of the things that I do, at least, and I know all of us do this, is that we want our characters to be, if not likable, then relatable, then interesting, and someone we can root for or at least understand. And so that means they're real people, and that means they have all kinds of different elements of their life. And even the most serious person can be funny or witty or fall in love. I remember someone asked me once if I could write a thriller without romance. And I said, well, no, because a real person has some romance stuff in their lives, whether it's lack of romance or wanting romance or missing romance or having romance or being thwarted in romance, especially in domestic suspense. And then they said, could you write a romance without a murder? And I'm like, what would the people do? I was in the right place.
So Hank, with your career as an investigative reporter, I can imagine that you have come across so many stories in your time that are inspiring and may have found its way into some of your writing. I'm wondering if you've ever had a moment, or what was the most memorable moment that you had where you're covering a story and you're like, I've got to figure out a way to make this into a book.
That's such a good question, and it makes a lot of sense, but to me it hasn't really worked that way. And because my novels aren't my television stories made into fiction. That said, when I think back on it, I've wired myself with hidden cameras and confronted corrupt politicians and chased down criminals and gone undercover and in disguise and into prisons and behind the scenes at the airport and underground at the courthouse, and I had murderers confess to me and people say that they were not not guilty of murder. And when I think of the experience, I put on mascara in a nuclear reactor. That is television for you. But I do think that those kinds of experiences are why we all write what we write. If we assign all of us to write a story about, the little girl in the woods, they'd all be different because of our own experiences about how we feel and what's happened to us and what we think that would be. I mean, I remember doing a series of stories about the housing crisis, and I remember seeing an eviction cop come out of a house in Boston, and he opened the front door. I was in the car watching them. He opened the front door and sort of put his hand on the door jamb and looked upset. And I thought, okay, that's the beginning of the novel. Because what was in that house, and what was really happening in that empty, foreclosed house, and what had he just discovered? Now, I'm sure it was nothing. But in my book, you know what was in that house. So those tiny little, it's more how people behave, and how people look, and how people react, than it is that specific situation.
That spark that kind of.
And you know it when you feel it. It's like the domino that falls, and all the other dominoes topple, and you can see that fullness of the whole novel in just one little gesture or expression or decision. I just love that.
And Alan and Donna, do you have real life moments that have somehow found their way into your stories, whether they're the main plot or just even like a little scene or the catalyst that starts it all?
I thought of one last night. I was at my mother's bedside in the hospital. She had just had a lumpectomy, and she was coming on the anesthetic, and I was fetching water and asking the nurses if this was okay. And I finally had done all the errands I needed to do for Mom, and I was going to be the beautiful daughter and sit at her bedside in the chair and just watch over her. And I sat down in the chair, and the chair went. The chair, it had a split in the vinyl seat of the chair, and it functioned like an elephant whoopee cushion. Mom, less than 2 hours out of surgery, opened one eye and blinked at it. Look, your parents get when you're up to something. And I said, it's a chair, Mom. Sure. I tried sitting down in it rapidly, it just made it louder. I tried easing myself into it gently, it just went, and she's, just stand at it. I took the chair out in the hall, and I stole the chair from another room. And, a funny anecdote to tell your family about Moms. But the next year I was writing a book in which my heroine's grandfather gets caution on the head and he's in the hospital. And I suddenly realized that I could use the giant whoopee cushion chair first for a bit of low humor, and then as a way for Meg to figure out that someone was in the room about to take another whack at grandfather. So you never know what weird little thing is going to suddenly be the perfect bit for your book.
Not everyone could put the giant whoopee cushion in. Raise your hand if you're not going to do that.
I was keeping track. The first part joke was at 10:22. So I decided to, write. I thought crime fiction would be good. That's what I was reading at the time. But I was sort of a nice suburban boy who didn't have much experience with crime. So I knocked over 7-Eleven. No, I took a Citizens Police Academy, where every week they have some kind of new thing that they showed. The drug guys came in and showed you the drugs, and we had a canine demonstration. We went to the shooting range, and we went on a ride-along. And we had the normal dips, drunken Publix, and some other cool stuff. And then we get this call on the radio. We have reports of people running through the community center parking lot with rifles. And this is in mean streets of Herndon, if anybody's familiar. So the cop was with, she flips on the siren, and we go tearing through those mean streets, and we pull up into the community center parking lot, and there's already a police car, a squad car there with the doors open, and nobody's in it. So she pulls up, she opens the door, she grabs the shotgun that is mounted between the seats, and looks at me and says, "Don't go anywhere." And I said, "Don't worry." And she runs off, leaving me alone in the cop car under the lights in the community center parking lot. So I'm like, well, this isn't good. So I
All the way down.
the windshield. And I was there for like 20 minutes, like, oh my God, what is going on? And I could see the headline, Ride Along Observer Killed in the Cruiser parking lot. It turned out it was kids with air rifles just running around. So how big was that? But that scene became this opening scene of a book that I creatively called Ride Along. And I thought it was great, right? So I wrote the query letter to get an agent, and I thought it was a great query letter, thought the book was great. I sent it out to 100 agents, and I got 100 rejections. And that's when I realized my definition of great is different than an agent's definition. But I ended up publishing it anyway.
And it's interesting, when you ask that question, now I realize that actually, my first book came from something that really happened. And I wonder if that, I remember it was back in the day when spam filters on emails weren't as good as they are now. And you had to remember that, and I had to go every morning and sort of clean out my email box from spam before I started my actual email. And I remember opening a spam by mistake. And the subject was a new refinancing deal for you. But in the body of this emails, it would look like lines from a Shakespearean play. So I thought, why would someone put a new refinancing deal for you with the subject line of a spam that's going to millions of people that most people won't open, that some people would open, and then there'd be lines from a Shakespearean play in the body of the email. And my brain, and I know you all have writer brain, and I know that you've all had this happen, my brain said, maybe it's a secret message. And I thought, secret messages in computer spam, are you kidding me? That's a great idea. And that was exactly my first book. That's exactly my first book. So the spam helped me. And that's how it happened in the history of the universe.
If something interesting happens with a bunch of writers, there are two ways that we react.
Dibs.
Yeah, that is. Well, the polite is, are you going to use?
Yes, I just like to.
But most times he is.
So speaking of dibs, Alan, you, with all due respect, you're all over the place. You got short stories, you got youth books, you got, books for alleged grown-ups. How do you decide? It's like, okay, I've got this story idea. How do you decide if this is going to be, this is a short story, or maybe this could be turned into a novel, or in reverse, have you ever had that situation where you thought, this is going to make a great novel, and you get in there and it's like, no, that's short story material?
Yeah. When I get an idea, I'll sit. I'm a sort of outline, sort of jot on some outline notes. So I get an idea, I sit down, and I start writing. And when I get to 5,000 words, if I think it's got more juice, I keep going. And if it doesn't, I type the end. And then I get, hey, Alan, what's with all these ambiguous endings in your short stories? I don't know. I think you can just tell what idea has enough meat to sustain 8,000 words and what doesn't. And I've never been tempted to expand. You know what? I was. One time, my critique group, I put a story, it's called The Boy with Binoculars, which ended up in Mystery Tribune. And the critique, some members of the critique said, you know what, this would make a great novel. And they were right, it would have made a great novel. But I was too lazy to add 75,000 words.
I do think that's one of the key questions of the universe. What is, to us at least, what is a short story and what is a novel, and even what is a good idea? That's really part of the magic of writing, isn't it? That you can have you have an idea, and we instantly know in some blink reflex, that's a good idea, or no, that won't work, that won't last. It's like sometimes you have a pebble and you plop it into a pond and it just sinks to the bottom, and that's not a good idea. And sometimes you plop that pebble into a pond and you can instantly see the ripples come out from that pebble, and you think, this will work, this has the fullness, this idea has the fullness of a novel. I had people have these, I had this idea that I would keep a little record in my email of my book ideas, so that when I needed a good book idea, I would just go to my folder that said book ideas, and I would not have to worry anymore, because to me, having that good idea is the hardest part of writing. All I need is one good idea a year, and that's all I need. And made this folder to have my good ideas, so when I needed my idea for my next book, I thought, aha, I have my folder, I'm gonna go look at it, and I opened it, and it was empty. There's absolutely not one good idea in it. So I'm a firm believer in the good ideas come when they're meant to come. But sometimes I think, I'm ready for the idea. But knock on wood, so far, so good.
Well, that reminds me, I was coming back from a mystery conference, and I woke up at 4 a.m. with the idea fully formed in my head for my thriller novel, Pray for the Innocent. And I wrote it out real quick because I had the idea, and it turned out really well. But now, every morning, I wake up, and I'm a little disappointed when I don't have that idea.
I think sometimes some sort of a short story in particular, you can see it all at once. You can see how it begins, and I mean, sometimes it's not going to be a novel, but wow, it can be fun. And short stories, it's a really great way of palate cleansing, because I mostly write funny books, but a lot of times I do write dark short stories, and you have something something you want to play with that doesn't fit either the genre of your series or the tone of your series, but you can play with it in a short story and use it anyway.
Now, before we kind of start our fun little wrap-up questions that we have for you guys, I do want to open it up to questions from the audience. Is there anybody who would like to ask one of our fabulous guests any questions about their writing? It doesn't have to be for one person in particular. Any thoughts or yes?
I'm just wondering, what kind of advice do you have for the new writers so that they don't start the road with mistakes that you know about that you learned?
And for the recording, the question is, what advice do you have for new writers so that they don't make the mistakes that you guys may have encountered along the way in your career?
It's go ahead and make the mistakes. One of the things I think that we all grew up with is school. And in a school, your teacher says, write an essay about how I spent my summer vacation. And then you write the essay, and then you hand it in, and you get A or F, and it's over. But writing a novel is not like that. Writing a short story is not like that. It's a process. It's trial and error. You're not going to get a grade. Nobody's going to see it until you want them to. So if you read and get that feeling, get that rhythm, get that architecture of what a book like yours would be, and then do the best you can, and then try it, and then you'll begin to see what works for you and what doesn't work for you. There's no magic secret that if you only knew it, your stories would work. There's only a magic secret for you, and that just takes time. Here's my advice: don't be impatient. It takes so much longer to write a book or a short story than you would think, and it takes so much longer to write a really good short story or a book than you would think. And the only key to doing is just persisting in it. I have a yellow sticky on my computer that says advance the story, and on the days that I don't know what to do, I just think, what does someone want, and how far will they go to get it? And you can fix it later. It's not set in stone. The editing is where the story is going to come out and shine and be the story that you wanted it to be. So just persevere, write the story, don't worry, and fix it later. And everything that you've worried about will vanish.
The best writing advice I give people, because I read it in one of Lawrence Block's essays. He was talking about when he first started writing full-time, and there were days when he was on fire to get to the keyboard. It was probably a typewriter back then. And days when he just wanted to do anything but. And because I'm a professional writer now, I'm a full-time writer now, he made himself go to the keyboard and write, even on the days when he wanted to do anything else but. Maybe I'll have to throw it away, but at least I'll have kept my professional discipline, or I'll have to edit the crap out of it. And he found out after some months of doing this, that what he wrote on the days when he really didn't want to be there was no worse than what he wrote when the days he was excited was no better. He had, by writing regularly, he had trained himself to write at a certain level that needed editing, but he wasn't wasting his time on those days when he could barely put his fingers on the keyboard. So my advice is find a way to trick yourself into writing, even if you don't feel like it. My way is I do what I call the whining memo, because that's how long ago I discovered it, when email was just a gleam in everybody's eye. I write something complaining about why this scene is going to be impossible to write. The information I haven't figured, I sometimes call it blocking the scene. I'm not writing the scene. I'm making a plan for writing the scene. First, Meg will do this, and then so-and-so comes in and says it. And so it's not in first person like the books, it's in third person. And it's a really low pressure way of oiling the pump, once your fingers start moving. It's very rare when I start writing about writing that it doesn't turn into writing before I'm finished. Trick yourself into doing it, force yourself to do it, it'll come out okay.
There are days that I'll be writing and I'll think, this is the worst sentence that anybody has ever written in the history of the planet.
That counts about 12 words for your report.
Exactly, that's why we, and I think, that's right, sister. That is the worst sentence that anybody's ever written. Now just write another bad sentence and another bad sentence and another bad sentence, and you can fix it later. And just keep going. We are so good at procrastination. All of us writers, we're the best. One day I thought, I'm gonna write, but first I have to alphabetize my spice rack. And then I thought, no, you don't, sister. Sit down and write your book. So,
A writer with a clean house is a writer on a deadline.
yeah.
Yes.
Could you tell us how your critique group formed?
Oh, yes, the question for the recording is, could you tell us how this fabulous critique group formed?
Ellen and I were in a critique group that was kind of falling apart due to geography and different names and people who had too much going on in their life. And Ellen Crosby and I said, okay, let's find another group. Let's make sure it's all people who are pretty seasoned, pretty experienced, and let's get some guys, because our previous group was a great group, but it was all women, and we really wanted to get the male perspective on some of our stuff. So we looked around and we said, who's kind of close by? And Alan lived like about 2 miles from me, and Ellen about another mile further along. And Art was the outlier. It was like 5 miles away. and we all decided, and we met in John's rec room, his basement, his rumpus room, and we called ourselves the Rumpi. But we literally, geography was tearing the previous group apart. And people who got stuck in traffic and couldn't make a meeting and stuff. And that was my recollection. We looked at who's close by and a good writer.
So I was the token guy because I live close. I'll take it.
Hey, we take whatever we get. Yes.
So this is for three of you. Was there a character or a scenario that you originally had in a draft and it didn't make the final version, but you saved it for later because you liked it so much?
So for the recording, did you ever have a character or a scene when you were working on one of your new projects that didn't maybe quite work in that particular project, but you liked it enough that you saved it and it worked its way into another project?
I had this happen to me a couple of months ago. I wrote my new book called Mother, Daughter, Sister, Stranger. And we're applauding now, but back then it was not. So I sent it to my editor, and she writes back, Hank, this is the best thing I've ever seen in my entire life. I'm so proud to be working with you on this. Just a couple of thoughts about it, and 14 single-spaced pages later. Truly. And one of the 14 single-spaced pages, she put like number 7, get a glass of wine and call me. So I thought, okay, fine. So I called her and she says, you have 2 points of view in this book. And One of them is a woman named Eliza, the main character, and then there's another point of view who is Whitney Hart, who is a literary agent. So multiple points of view throughout. She says, I think that whole point of view of the agent has to come out. The whole point of view has to come out. And so here you have this big puzzle piece, this big puzzle full of pieces, and half the pieces are Whitney, and I had to rewrite the book to be the same story, only with one content. So those are some beautiful chapters that will never see the light of day. I couldn't have written the book without writing them, but that's the kind of struggle that we have. That's the kind of joy that we have when an editor has a good idea. And the good idea means kill, 27 chapters out of your book, and I'm happy about it. I was thrilled about it. It was a challenge to write. It was a joy to fix, and it came out so much more wonderfully in the end. So those chapters will never see the light of day, but they do see the light of day because they're reflected in the book. And that's what I'm kind of talking about, that you just never know what's going to work and what's not going to work. You just have to persevere.
When I first turned in Murder with Peacocks, my first book, which ended up winning the Agate and several other things, I had an early critique group that I didn't end up staying with because it was just too far away. And every time I came home from this critique group, I ended up in another bad portion of DC. And I decided it was better for my health not to meet with these people because they were just the wrong side of the world for me. But because they thought the murder happened too late in the book, I added on a prologue that happened, at one of the grand dramatic moments of the book, and then we drop back to, 3 months earlier. And I won the contest, and I was having my first meeting with Ruth Cadden, the legendary Ruth Cadden, and she said, well, first of all, I think we should lose the prologue. The prologue doesn't really, why are you laughing? And I said, because I always stuck the prologue on because 15 million people told me that it needed more action sooner. She said, ignore them, let it be the book it is. And I took that prologue off and I was never happier. And in the second book, Ruth hated the subplot. She hated the subplot, she just thought it was ruining the whole book. And I said, well, you need another subplot. So I said, well, like any idea? She said, well, the island this takes place on was home to it's a famous place for artists. And she suggested having a subplot involving these famous artists, the Wyeths. And I thought, this is great because Mohegan Island is the home of the Wyeths. I remember this moment. I was sitting on the floor of the art department of Borders. It was that long ago, because I was researching the Wyeths, and they're fascinating. There's so much drama in them. There was incest and murder and suicide and like monster parents repressing their children and underage girls being seduced and painted. You know what there wasn't in the Wyeths? There wasn't a lot of humor in them. And I realized that what was funny was me trying to find a comic side to the lives of these tortured artists, and that gave me the subplot that worked. So sometimes the book is better because your editor says, I've had whole scenes that I took out, I was like, it's a great scene. It doesn't advance the plot 1 millimeter.
I had a scene in my book, The Murder List, where my editor, who was a genius, said, this is the best jury deliberation scene that I have ever read in my entire life. She says, but it all has to go. If you think about it, it's just a bunch of guys sitting around talking. You just don't want that. And I thought it was genius and full of justice and morals and ethics and meaningful stuff. And she's like, no, just goodbye to that scene. And she's right. What a good editor is like when you drop a drop of iodine into a glass of clear water, like bing, you have a good idea and everything changes for the best.
Of course, if Alan has an idea that his editor wants to take it out, he merely finds it under genre to put it in.
Okay, we're about out of time here, so we got one quick question for the three of you. Just a little bit of fun here. So, Meg Langslow, Jane Ryland, and Mess Hopkins walk into a bar. What are they ordering? Who's picking up the tab? Can Sarah and I join? Alan, we'll start with you.
Okay, I want to give a little prelude before I give you the answer. The Mr. Ready community is so great. The people are generous and with their time and with their effort, and they're so supportive. And you will find no two more supportive, more generous people than Donna Andrews and Hank Phillippi Ryan. I've been with Donna every month for whatever, and she always gives me advice. And I'll never forget, Hank, you probably forgot, when I was a newbie writer, I was like a baby writer at one of these conventions, and Hank came up to me and said, Alan, if you ever need anything from me, please let me know. And I thought that was so terrific. So I want to follow, I want to take those guidelines, and I want to extend an invitation to everyone out there, every single person out there. If you need something in the writing business, please do not hesitate to come up and ask Hank or Donna. Now, they both edited Stories of My Anthologies, and they both give me wonderful blurbs for my books. So as a very minuscule token of my appreciation, I got you little gifts. I'm going to wrap them. Got from Zazzle, which has, they have like a writers only section. It's called Frazzle.
I think after that, he's mine.
So back to the question. So, Ms. Hopkins.
I need to interrupt you, I'm so sorry, but I think I think the universe has switched the mugs, and you will see why in a minute, because, and you couldn't have known it, but this is so genius, that this one says, keep clam and food please.
So I think Ms. Hopkins would invite the two protagonists and their creators out to a coffee bar where they could use their mugs, and he would like to treat, but he has forgotten his wallet.
Having read two Ms. Hopkins books, I know he would. Besides, if he brought his wallet, there wouldn't be anything in it, right? But he would put us up in the hotel if we were in trouble. Yes. Meg would probably be having a margarita, because I find it easier to give Meg my taste, because I will be having a margarita if you see me in the bar, or a Diet Coke. For years, I had Meg drinking coffee, and then I made a mistake, and I did my morning routine, where I do my caffeine cold and bubbly as in a Diet Coke. And someone said, oh, why is Meg Sunday not drinking coffee? And I had to go and retcon it. I had to go and put an explanation. Meg finally realized she didn't love coffee, she loved caffeine. And she didn't like coffee. So Meg will be drinking what I'm drinking, because it's just easier to remember.
It's so funny, when you have a character who's sort of like you, when I started writing Charlotte McNally, who was a television reporter in Boston, who was worried that she is getting too old for her career. And she wonders what happens when you're married to your job in television and the camera doesn't love you anymore. So I was scraping the bottom for that idea. But I don't like to drive. And so when there was a moment when I had to have Charlotte McNally drive, and I thought, well, this isn't going to work because she doesn't like to drive. And then I thought, no, she's a fictional character. She loves to drive. And that was the moment that I realized that I was writing fiction, that I could take control of something that wasn't me, that it was a fictional character. So, however, Jane Ryland and I will both have white wine in the bar. And we would know red wine. I've never had white wine. Red wine in the bar. And we would both be investigating whether the bar actually has a license, whether there are two. Who was working behind the counter, whether anybody is double parked outside, how many police are in there. There's a lot of investigation that goes on until the second glass of red wine, in which case it just doesn't matter at all.
wonderful people. Thank you for inspiring us all. Thank you everybody for being here. We're sorry that we're late.